All right, now the fifth book of the Old Testament, which is the last book of the Pentateuch. I would say this book, just like any other book, is very important book, just like any other book. But I would say this book is very important for you guys. The reason I say this book is very important for you guys is that I don't know what you or how much you know about the Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy is somewhat referenced in New Testament and several times, but it is not really well known to people about what this book is about and how this book was actually written. So this book is, just by looking at the name of this book or the title of this book, it's Deuteronomy. So for you guys, what does that mean, Deuteronomy, to you? What does this mean? All right? Is that something that, is that a English, or like, what is this? Deuteronomy, the Deuteronomy is actually, it's a Latin word. So it's two words are kind of like, putting together. So deutero in Latin word means it's two, like number one and two, a two. Nami is law, which means it's a second law. That's what it means. Deutero is second, or the two. Nami is a law. So, which means second law. That's what it means. So, the Latin word was actually, kind of like later on when the Bible was translated into a Greek word. The Greek took the same Latin word, right, and then just translated to Hebrew, the Greek word, which is same as Deuteronomy. So they just took it as it is. So second law. So what does that mean by second law? Is that means God gave another law? No, that's not what it means. So second law means it's like, this is the Leviticus and Numbers, or even Exodus. God gave the law and re-emphasizing one more time, a second time, it's just emphasizing what was described in those three books, right? It's not just three books, but from the Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus, and Numbers. So it just, whatever it was said in the past, especially from the time when they were coming out of Egypt, and as they're wrapping up their 40 years of journey, so they're just kind of like repeating and just reminding them, this is the law. And this book is about the last sermon of Moses. Right before Moses, since he could not get into the promised land, and right before he died, he gave the last sermons, right before he died, to the second generations, who was either born or when they were very young when they came out of Egypt. For those are the people who lived and learned the way to serve the Lord in the desert. So Moses, as the elder, because as you know, all the first generation who came out of Egypt and the age above 20 and above, they grumbled against the God, and God said, you will die in the desert. So all the first generation of the Israelites are all dead in the desert. So no more first generations. All people who are counted to go out to a war, they all died, except Joshua and Caleb. Everyone else who are counted to go to a war, age above 20 and up, they all died. So Moses, as one of the just most elder person, and reminding them, right before you go to this promised land, I will remind you what you need to focus, what you need to learn. So he was giving last speech to the second generation of Israelites. So, people like you, the second generation, as you're now you're kind of like taking over, the society from the older generations. Older generations are, kind of like, pushed away from this, from the society. Now you're kind of a fresh blood is coming into this and slowly taking over this society. So same thing. Now the second generation is now becoming a mainstream of this Israelites. So it is reminding to the second generations to make sure that you learn this. So this is about the speech or a sermon that Moses gave it to the second generation right before they enter into the promised land. So it is, this entire book was pretty much spoken in just a few days, literally few days. It was just nothing more than just a speech, and just like when you graduate, usually a school, invite some external, the guests to come and, give a speech to all the people who are graduating. It's reminding them what to focus and how to face the new world. And it's the same thing. It is pretty much Moses giving that same speech to the second generation. So I don't know if you ever had a chance to read this Deuteronomy, in full context, not just skipping through, like just reading through, but if you ever really pay attention to what you're reading and the Deuteronomy, most likely, you have not read recently, but when you kind of like sum it up, this Deuteronomy is just very simple. Let's take a look at Deuteronomy. Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is probably the most important important chapters of all Deuteronomy. So it's pretty much to sum it up what Moses is saying to all these people. So literally, when you go into this promised land, don't forget what God had done for us and why our generations and our previous generations had to walk in this wilderness, what God had done for them. So, verse 6, it says, "So you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his way and by fearing him." So literally, this is what Deuteronomy is teaching them. Commit yourself to keep the covenant God made with us and the laws that God gave it to us. Keep them. Put it in your heart. Remember who God is so that you fear the Lord. So verse 18, it says, "You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers as it is this day. So God is saying, remember, God gave you the power to gain the wealth, and also that you can keep the covenants and the laws that I gave you, to keep it. So this chapter 8 from the Deuteronomy kind of focus and summarize the things that Moses wanted to say. But if you actually, if you summarize even more, and if you actually put this entire book in one word, is love. It's a love. God loves you. And love your God with all your heart, with all your mind. That's what God is teaching us. Love the Lord. So, obviously, Moses gave this speech to the second generation. And when Moses gave this speech to the second generation, this book is a slightly different, although it's like repeating a lot of stuff that was already covered in Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers. So it talks about a lot of law that was already we learned. But why does he keep repeating all this? Just because reminding them. What it's important, you just keep reminding them. So God wants to know. And Moses, after 40 years of the journey, when he wrote, Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers, so he pretty much documented everything what he experienced during that time. But this is just like sum it up everything. So he learned a lot of stuff over 40 years of time, and he realized why God did what he did, and why God gave things, and what God gave is what is God is try to really tell the Israelites. He learned a lot of lessons. So, it's like, your fathers or parents are giving you a lifelong, learned experience to you. So they have learned, and they made a lot of mistakes. They learned something good, something bad, and as they get older, they want to just kind of like sum it up their experience, and then they want to just give to their children's, please take this experience that I gained over time. I want you to just learn this so you don't make the same mistake that I made and things that I've learned, so you can follow that way, so you don't have to waste your time doing other stuff. So Moses doing the same exact thing, and over 40 years of time he learned a lot and how to serve the Lord, and he's giving all this lifelong experience to the second generations. This is what you should learn from me. And we're gonna talk about some of those as we actually, going through this book, but it is very important to learn. So let me ask you this. Why do you think Moses was loved, admired, and respected by the Israelites? Why? Not because he led the Israelites out of Egypt, or he led millions of people, or he performed it's like miraculous things, or because he went up to the Mount Sinai and received the God's law. Out of many things he had done and that we know what he did, what most people forget is what really makes him the great man. He is the one of the small number of people in the Bible who truly knows or knew God's heart. He knew God's heart, and he knew exactly what God was actually had in his mind. Other people could not read, but he was able to read God's mind and interpret it to the people, what God is trying to say. Not many people in the Bible were able to do that. I can think about maybe just a few of the people that comes to my mind that had the very same or similar caliber like Moses, who knew God's heart so well. For you, who comes to your mind? Who truly knew God's heart and, able to actually explain to the people? Well, besides Jesus, of course he is. Besides Jesus. David, yeah, absolutely. David was one of them. Yep. Job, no, not really. Anyone else I can think of? Another person that I can think of it is John the John, not John the Baptist, the disciple John. Yeah. You know why? There's a very similarity between Moses and John. That is, they both knew God's heart, and that was love. And I will explain what that really means. Moses truly understood God's heart and what he's trying to teach the Israelites. Why God gave the laws to Israelites. And he knew what he meant. Why he gave that laws to the Israelites. And John, when you read his books, John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Revelations, you will see him, and in his book, is full of love. He explains what love is about. He knew God has a heart, and he loves people. That's what all these people in common. Moses, David, and John. All three people. Of course, other people knew God's heart, but not as much as these three individuals. Of course, you can count the Paul, absolutely. But if I actually have to pick three, that will be those three. Moses, David, and John. I will pick those three. So, Moses wanted to explain to all the Israelites, making sure with, burning hearts to just re-emphasize what they should do, how they should follow the Lord. He had a really burning heart to give this message to the people. Whether they listen or not, that's a different story. But he wanted to give this message to the people. So the true. So this book we call it Deuteronomy, which is a second law, as we said. In Hebrew Bible, the title of this book is Devarim. Devarim. It's actually used Ha Devarim. Ha Devarim. So Ha is like the. Okay? Devarim means words, which means Hadebarim means the words. So that's the title of this book, Devarim. So, Elek Hadebarim Aser Diber Moshe. God, these are the words which spoke to Moses and to give the message to the Israelites. These are the word that Moses gave this to the Israelites before they crossed the Jordan River. So when we read this, the very first introductions of this book, these are the words. You see this? The words? This is Ha-Debarim. That Moses spoke to all Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness, in the Arabah, opposite Sub, between Parans and Topel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. It is 11 days' journey from the Horeb by the way of a mountains, Sears and Kadesh Barnea. All right, when you read this, from the mountain Horeb is the Mount Sinai, which they received the God's law, right? From there to Kadesh Barnea, what happened at the Kadesh Barnea? Do you remember what happened at the Kadesh Barnea? Does it ring a bell at all, or not sure? What happened at the Kadesh Barnea? Anyone? I mean, something major happened. No. Something happened, yeah. But what happened? All right, let's turn to chapter 1, verse 19. Let's find out what happened. Then we set out from Horeb and went through all that great and terrifying wilderness that you saw on the way to the hill country of the Amorites, as the Lord our God commanded us, as we came to Kadesh Barnea. And I say to you, you have come to the hill country of Amorites, which the Lord our God is giving us. See, the Lord your God has set the land before you. Go up, take possessions as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has told you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Then all of you came near me and said, let us send men before us, that they may explore the land for us and bring us word again of the way by which we must go up, and the cities into the which we shall come. The thing seemed good to me, and I took 12 men from you, 1 man from each tribe, and they turned and went up into the hill country, and came to the valley of Escor, and spied it out, and they took in their hands some of the fruits of the land, and brought it down to us, and brought us word again, and said, it is a good land that the Lord our God is giving us. What happened at Kadesh Barnea? They sent the 12 spies. They sent the 12 spies up to the promised land. They explored it for 40 days and came back, and they gave the report. Surely this land as great as God said, flowing with milk, a lot of fruits. Look at this, the fruits. It's great. However, people who are living in that land as a great man, we look like grasshopper. So therefore, it's a great land, but we can't get in there. If we go there, we're going to get killed. Right? Yeah. So literally, Caleb and Joshua said, surely we went to see the same place you saw. We saw exactly the same thing what you saw. Yes, I totally agree with you. Everything what you saw, I agree with that. But you know what? I disagree with you that, we can still go there and take the possession because God will deliver this land to us. I disagree that, not to go up there. Let's go. So only Caleb and Joshua, gave the report and said, let's go. Whereas all 10 of the people and said, no way. And then what happened to the people? Obviously, they listened to the 10 of the people, which is very usual, right? They completely outnumbered, right? 10 versus 2. Obviously, 10 must be right. Right? So they listened to those 10 spies, and then they said, we're not going there. And then God was mad, and that's when he said, okay, I count the 40 days, and each day as 1 year, that you will be traveling around this wilderness for the next 40 years. And that's where the misery started. So, remember when we actually started to, study the numbers, right? What was the first thing God did? He counted. He did the census. He just counted all the people who can go into the war, right? The God was ready to go. Well, let's go. Let's find out who can actually go up there. Let's go. So God's plan was to put these Israelites into this land as quick as possible. From the Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb, to Kadesh Barnea only took how long? How long did it take? Literally 11 days to get there. So within 2 weeks, you can move from Mount Horeb to Kadesh Barnea. And from there, you can just walk over to Promised Land. Literally, it should have taken less than a month to get there. They didn't have to spend all this time in the wilderness. They could have gone in within a month. But think about this. Why did they have to actually, wander around in the wilderness for 40 years? Remember, whether they got to Promised Land as they were listening to Caleb and Joshua might have actually got into the Promised Land, right? Or versus they wander around in the wilderness for 40 years and finally they were able to get into the promise, the same place, after 40 years. Finally, they got in. So ultimately, they got to the place where God had planned for the Israelites to go. Whether it took 1 month or less than 2 weeks, or wander around 40 years and waste of all your time and energy and go into the Promised Land 40 years after. They ended up at the same place. This is something you need to keep in mind. God accomplished and delivered the people as he planned, put the Israelites into the Promised Land. So what changed? Meaning that God had a plan and his plan was fulfilled as he planned. But because of the Israelites' resistance and disobedience, made them to wander around for 40 years. God's plan was fulfilled, but because of their disobedience, unfaithfulness, as a consequence, they wander and wasted their time in the wilderness for 40 years. Now, I want you to think. God has a plan for you and each one of us. Me, you, and all of us. God has a plan in my life, and He will fulfill the plan that He has. He planted a certain plan in our life. That's why we are here. But depending on how we respond and how we, react, we may wander 40 years in wilderness versus we fulfill His needs immediately. So whose choice is that? Is that God's choice or is that my choice? It's our choice. It's the decision that we made. So this is something that I always tell my daughters when she was very young, and I always told her. This is one of the lessons that she learned. I don't know whether she really understands or not, but that's a different story. But I always told her, you can make decision whatever you want. But I want you to know, the decision that you make, you have to face the consequence. You have to be responsible for the decisions that you made. You can make any decision you want, but the consequences will follow you, and you have to be responsible. So before you make that decision, think about the consequence that you will face before you make that decision. I cannot make a decision for you. You will have to make that decision. Even though I'm a parent, I cannot make a decision for you. You're the only one who can make the decision. But think about the consequence before you make that decision. Of course, it's easy to say than done, right? We all know. It's not a, surprising, truth. We all know. But you know what? We just ignore the consequence we will face. We just do it anyway. Israelites didn't think about the consequence. They just complained, grumbled, and they had to face the consequence, which wandered for 40 years. Now God is giving you a chance as well. And God is giving us a chance. You could either go directly into the promised land, or you can wander and learn the hard lessons and wasted all your time. Finally, you will learn, but it will take some time. But by the time you realize you actually completely fulfills God's plan, you would have wasted a lot of energy, your time, and all that. So we have to make the right decision before the Lord. What decision are you going to make? So come back to verse 3 here. In the 40th year. So now, almost at the tail end of this journey. Now they're about to go to Promised Land, crossing the Jordan. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month. So it's almost at the end of that 40 years. The tail end of that 40 years. Moses spoke to the people of Israel according to all the Lord had given him in commandment to them. So whatever he heard, he told Israelites. Obviously, he had a good memory. He remembered what God told him. Well, he was not suffering from dementia or anything like that. He remembered exactly what God told him and just delivered that message to the people. His memory was not fading. He remembered everything. After he had defeated Sihon the king of the Amorites who lived in Heshbon, and Og the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth, and Edrei. Beyond the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to explain this law, saying, "The Lord our God said to us in Horeb, 'You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Turn and take your journey and go to the hill country of Amorites and to all their neighbors in Arabah, in the hill country and in the lowland and in the Negev and by the sea coast and land of the Canaanites and Lebanon as far as the great river and the river Euphrates. See, I have set the land before you. Go in and take possession of the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give it to them and their offspring after them.'" So God gave this promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that you and your descendants will possess this land. And as he promised, and of course, years after God gave that promise, they were finally now taking the possessions of this land that God made a promise, hundreds of years ago. So finally, what he promised to his forefather was fulfilled. Although Abraham did not see it, Isaac did not see it, Jacob did not see it, but their descendants, they remember what God had told them. They realize after hundreds years later, what they saw was God's promise was fulfilled. At that time I said to you, I am not able to bear you by myself. The Lord your God has multiplied you, and behold, you are today as numerous as the stars of heaven. May the Lord, the God of your fathers, make you 1,000 times as many as you are, and bless you as he has promised you. How can I bear by myself the weight and burden of you and your strife? Choose for your tribe wise, understanding, and experienced men, and I will appoint them as your heads. And you answered me, the things that you have spoken is good for us to do. So I took the heads of your tribes, wise and experienced men, and set them as heads over you, commander of 1,000, commander of 100s, commander of 50s, commander of 10, the officer throughout your tribes. And I charged your judge at that time, hear the case between your brothers, and judge righteously between a man and his brother, or the alien who is with them. You shall not be partial in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. You shall not be intimidated by any more, for the judgment is God's. And the case that is too hard for you, you shall bring it to me, and I will hear it. And I commanded you at that time all the things that you should do. All right. One thing you need to remember. So, Moses is saying to Israelites, there, as I mentioned, he's giving the speech right before they enter into the promised land. And he is saying, okay, first of all, I cannot handle myself. So, I'm going to appoint the head of your each tribes, so that we share the responsibility, and not only me doing the old things, then we will have, smart people, understanding and experienced people in each tribe, and they will lead you. One thing you have to learn from here. In God's work, it's not one person doing all the job. Everybody takes responsibility. The church is like a living organ. We cannot say our brain is the most important. We cannot say our heart is the most important. We have to have each organ in our body to function normal. As one side is actually painful, and if it's not functioned very well, you will have a problem. And you will suffer it. All the parts in our body has to function well together in order for us to function normal. Right? Of course the brain is important. Of course the heart is important. Of course our stomach is important. Of course other parts of the organ is very important. But each part has its own functions, and you have to function as it's supposed to function. Right? In church, we have our responsibility. We have to share the burden. We have to share all these accountabilities as a church. Not as the one person lead everything and doing everything. No. God is actually making people to work together. And second, why all of a sudden God actually appoints the judge? Right after he actually appoints the leaders or head of each tribe, the second thing he did was actually having this judge. We get that pointing ahead is important, but what's so important about actually appointing judge? What's so big deal about this? Okay. Okay. So, when you look at this, there's two parts. One is the head, the other one is judge. Right? The two things that Moses is talking about. Head and judge. So, what's important to rule this people, Israelites, is two leaders is required. One is the head of each tribe, the other one is judge. So, listen to what he's saying. Verse 16, and I charged you, or judge at that time, hear the case between your brothers and judge righteously between a man and his brother or the aliens who is with them. So this judge is judging it not only for their brothers, right, but also alien as well. So it's not just for Israelites, but the people who are living among them. Okay? You shall hear the small and the great alike. You shall not be intimidated by anyone, for the judgment is God's. So what he's telling is everyone is equal. Equality. Whether you're old, young, man, woman, child, equal. As a judge, the judge has to treat everyone equal. There's no, differentiation from one group of people versus another. He has to be equally treat them, regardless of who they are, whether they're Israelites or alien, doesn't matter. Treat them equally. And then, don't look at their appearance. Don't look at their don't get intimidated by them, and give the fair judgment to the people. The fair judgment. And who's the judge? The ultimate judge is God. Ultimate judge. So when you actually go to the city court, and there's a judge, right? and you actually get the, a verdict from the judge, and then you can actually complain, and you can actually, subpoena, or you can complain to the county, court, and then you can go to state court, and then you can go to federal court, right? You can continue to escalate your case until you get the final, the judgment. So the ultimate points where the judgment will be done by God. So from God's point of view, God is the judge. So Moses is seeing this as the God is the head and God is the judge. He will be fair to everyone, regardless of who they are. God will be the judge, and he will be the judge to be fair. Now, here's one thing you need to keep in mind. When you hear the word judge, what comes to your mind? When you hear the word judge, what comes to your mind? And how do you feel about this word judge? Just like what Yeonsu said, it depends on your situations. If you have not done anything wrong, there's nothing to fear, nothing to afraid of a judge. You know why? Because the judge has got nothing to do with you. If you had done nothing wrong, you don't have to stand before the judge, right? Judge means nothing to you because he has no part in your life. He's got nothing to do with you. There's nothing to fear about judge. You only fear when you had done something wrong that you have to stand before the judge, that you have to waiting for his verdict and what the decision he will make for the consequence of the things that you had done. Right? Let's think about this. Judge, right, has their children, right? Judge might have their parent. Judge might have their siblings. Will they fear the judge? As a family member, if they had not done anything wrong? No. As your neighbors, as a friend, there's nothing to afraid of this person. The judge is nothing more than just positions and a title that defines him, right? But when he's not at the judgment table, that he has to judge someone who had done wrong, is nothing more than a normal person, just like you and me. We can hang out at the bar, right? We can hang out at the beach. We can hang out at the other places. We can just hang out with this person without fearing this person, right? Even if he's wearing, the garment on the judgment seat, and I had done wrong. I had not done wrong. There's no reason for me to fear this person. But soon as that I had done something wrong, that I have to stand before a judge, that I'm waiting for the judgment call, that I will fear. The person who actually had done wrong, that have to stand before the judge, then they fear the judge. It could be that person, judge might be your father, judge might be your, parents. It doesn't really matter, but if you actually stand before the judge, because that person will judge you, then you will fear. So depending upon your positions before the judge makes the difference of how you feel about judge. Right? It's not about him. The judge doesn't change. Judge is the judge. Whether he's actually at the court or whether he's outside or doing shoppings or doing other stuff, he's a judge. But when he stands at the seat that he needs to make a judgment call about certain incidents, right? Then that's where people fear. We're all in the court, right? We're all in the court. You called in as, maybe witness, or maybe you were called in as as a guest. There are many different types of people in a court, right? But unless you're the one who's waiting for the judgment, nobody fears judge. We're in the same courtroom, right? Only the defendant is the one who feared. Is that correct? Nobody fears him except that person. Because the judge will determine how your life will be in the future. Think about this. If our God is judge, if you don't consider yourself as the sinner who had committed sin, right? You will not fear. You will not fear him because you don't consider yourself as a sinner. Soon as you consider yourself as a sinner, you will fear the judge. But if you don't consider it, you are a sinner, you will not fear him at all. There's nothing to afraid of him. Because you're not afraid of him, you can do whatever. Right? Because you don't consider yourself a sinner. As long as you don't commit any things to be judged, you're not going to fear him. Only people who consider themselves and know they're the sinner, they're standing before the judgment table, they're the ones who fear the judge. Now, going back to the very first question I asked, what comes to your mind when you hear the word judge? If you don't consider yourself as a sinner, you will not fear him. If you consider yourself as a sinner, you will fear him. Besides the authority, beside of righteousness, all that word that comes to our mind. But what's important is we will fear, we will be afraid if we consider ourselves to be a sinner. And judge has to be fair and have to treat the people equally. There can't be a favoritism or it cannot be unfair to this judge. To this judgment when he makes the judgment call. It has to be fair, right? Because in this world, we do see the judge makes the wrong decisions and intentionally actually making the wrongful decisions and then put innocent people into a prison. We do see that in this world. But God as the ultimate judge, he will never do that. He will always treat us equally, regardless of, our age, regardless of our gender, regardless of our, the situations, our positions. He will always be equal to us, because God has to be. So Moses is putting the head of the tribe first, and second he puts the judge, which represent how God treats us. He is the head of us. He is the judge for us. That's the important things. You have to know that he is our head. Right? What does the New Testament says? Jesus is the head of the church. Right? We are the body of the church. Right? And Jesus is the judge. And we are the defendant. And we are afraid because we're a sinner. Now we're waiting for the judgment call. But the judge said, if the judge said, you are free. Soon as you hear the word you're free, you don't have to serve any years. You're free to go. Then you will see the judge differently. You no longer have to fear that judge anymore. Because you are a free man, because you are no longer a sinner. Nothing to afraid at this point. Soon as you hear the decisions that you're a free man, you don't have to serve any the years in the prison. So now we consider ourselves as a sinner, and we are at the judgment table. And if we'll be judged, if we don't know what will be judged, well, you'll be feared. But if you realize the judge says you're a free man, you no longer have to fear the judge. That judge could be your neighbor, your friends, right? You no longer have to fray. So, judge is the same person. Judge is the judge, but how we feel about judge is determined by my position. Who am I? Am I the sinner, or am I the innocent person? Depending upon my situations, my positions, that determines how I feel about this person, the judge. And then verse 19 and on, I already read through, and Moses explaining to Israelites what the first generation had done. When I brought you almost 38 years ago, when I actually brought you into this Kadesh Barnea, and you guys just wanted to actually check out that place. I had 12 spies up there. You guys checked it out and came back, but you guys did not listen to what I had to say. But because they disobeyed me, I had them to wander for 38 years in the wilderness. So come back to verse 26. Yet you would not go up, but rebelled against the command of the Lord your God, and you murmured in your tents and said, because the Lord hated us, he has brought us out of the land of Egypt to give us into the land of the Amorites to destroy us. Where are we going up? Our brothers have made our hearts melt, saying, the people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up heaven, and besides we have seen the sons of Anakim there. Then I said to you, do not be in dread or afraid of them. The Lord your God, who goes before you, will himself fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt before your eyes. Said in the wilderness, where you have seen how the Lord your God carried you, as a man carried his sons all the way that you went up until you came to this place. Yet in spite of this word, you did not believe the Lord your God, who went before you in the way to seek you out of a place to pitch your tents in fire by night and in the cloud by day, to show you by what way you should go. When God was about to bring them into the promised land and told them to go in, God already had a plan. God was going to bring them into the promised land, and he was going to go ahead of them, fight for them, even before they get there. So God was about to go there and start the fight before they even come. But they could not trust that God will do that. And think about it in our life. Do you truly believe that God is going ahead of us and fight for us before we face all this? Do you truly trust that and believe that? Or do you just know it? We don't really trust that. We don't really believe that. We just know it. But we don't really trust. Knowing and trusting and believing is different. We know, yeah, God will fight for us. Yeah, but I won't go it. Because we don't truly trust that God will do that. And even today's life, when we are put in the very difficult situations, we always complain, we always grumble. Although God is in front of us and already fighting for us, we don't see that. How he actually walked through the wilderness? In verse 31, he clearly says, "And in the wilderness, where you have seen how the Lord your God carried you, as a man carries his son, all the way that you went until you came to this place." How did God carry the Israelites? As the father carries his boys in his back. So who does all the hard work? The man does all the hard work, and you are just, right, on the man's back. You don't do much. This is how God does. God is the one who carries you. God does all the work. Although you may think you're the one who's doing all that, but no, you're not. I mean, I want you to think about it from Israelites' perspective. They're the one who walked the wilderness. They're the one who suffered it, right? They're the one who are actually living in the wilderness. It's not God. What are you talking about, God? We're the one who walked the wilderness. Where were you? When we walk in all this wilderness for 38 years, where were you? Where was he? How? I need you to put yourself in their shoes. Not just bluntly say like, oh yeah, God was in front of them. God carried them. No, don't say that easy. I want you to put yourself in their shoes. You know, living like this for 40 years, right? Where was God? I'm the one who walked on the sand and suffered from all this hot sun and eating this creepy manna. Where were you? What did they say? You hated us. You hated us. You brought us out of the Egypt so that you can actually kill by the Amorites. That's what you brought us out. I see. I get it. Now I see. You love us? What are you talking about? Where did you get that idea? When did you love us? And where were you when we were walking all this like sand? I want you to put yourself in their shoes. And I want you to put God's heart and think. There's two different distinctive perspectives. People's perspective, God's perspective. God's perspective is, I carried you on my back. You're not the one who walk in this wilderness. I'm the one who walk. You're on my back. That's God's perspective. I love you. I wanted to protect you. I want to carry all the burdens for you. And the people's perspective, what on earth are you talking about? I have not seen you. When did you carry me on your back? I clearly saw my own eyes, my feet, my hands. I walked on this land. I wandered. I didn't see you. You hated us. So, how do you reconcile the difference between these two? God's perspective and people's perspective. How do we reconcile that? Can you reconcile it? It's easy to say that, yeah, God walked with us and God loved us and God had done all these good things. It's easy to say. But truly, when you walk through your, all this hard life and you don't feel like God is doing anything for you, isn't it how we normally feel when we actually go through the very hard life? We just know God is doing something, but I don't know what He's doing. We just know God is doing something, but I don't know. I'm suffering. It's hard. So where was God when they were walking in this wilderness for 38 years? Where was God? Where? Where was He? There, where? Here, there, where was it? Remember. 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 When they were in the wilderness, they always camped around the tabernacle. Right? Where did God say, I will be? I'll be at the top of the mercy seat, in between the cherubims. God was there. This is where I will be. God was always moving along with them. Whenever the tabernacle was moving, God was always at the center of the community. God walked with them for 40 years. With them. God did not have to limit Himself where He needs to be, but He said, I will be there. Why is He there? To forgive your sins. I'm there to forgive your sins. I walk with you. I'll be there. It's not like, okay, walk over there, but I'm not going to be there. The true leader is the leader who actually always be with his own team, leading in the front line, right? That's the true leader. Not somewhere very far and giving a phone call is that you move forward, but I'll stay back. That's not a leader. Leader is the one who go up front. That's why the tabernacle, and whenever they move, what was in the front? Ark of Covenant. It was the Ark of the Covenant was the front in the line. God was in the front. They just could not see Him because it's invisible. But God was there. God loved them so much that I walk with you. But no one remember that God walked with them. No one remember God was there. His love was never been treated right. No one saw his love. And their claim was, you hated us. You brought us out of Egypt to kill us. Love? Are you kidding me? That's all they saw. God hated them, although God loved them. Hate and love is a two different word. But one person perceived as hate, God perceived as a love. Because they did not listen. So verse 32 here it says, yet in spite of this, the word you did not believe the Lord your God, who went before you in the way to seek you out a place to pitch your tents in fire by night and in the cloud by day, to show you by what way you should go. God is the one is leading their way and walk them through where they should be. Verse 34, and the Lord heard your words and was angered, and he swore, no one of these men of this evil generation shall see the good land I swore to give to your fathers, except Caleb and son of Jephunneh, and he will see it, and to him and to his children I will give the land on which he has trodden, because he has wholly followed the Lord. Even with me, the Lord was angry on your account, and said, you also shall not go in there. Joshua the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall enter, encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit. And as for a little ones, who you said would become a prey, and your children's who today have no knowledge of good or evil, they shall go in there, and to them I will give it, and they shall possess it. But as for you, turn and journey into the wilderness in the directions of the Red Sea. Then you answer me, we have sinned against the Lord. We ourselves will go up and fight, just as the Lord our God commanded us. And every one of your fastened on his weapons of war, and thought it easy to go up into the hill country. And the Lord said to me, say to them, do not go up or fight, for I am not in your midst, lest you be defeated before your enemies. So I spoke to you, and you would not listen, but you rebel against the command of the Lord, and presumptuously went up into the hill country. When the Amorites who lived in that hill country came out against you and chased you as a beat, and beat you down in Seir as far as Hormah. And you returned and wept before the Lord, but the Lord did not listen to your voice or give ears to you. So you remained at Kadesh many days, the days that you remained there. So when God told them to go up and take the possessions of this land, they refused to go. After he said, okay, since you rebel against me, you don't trust me, so that you're going to actually wander. And then they came back and said, whoa, hold on. We'll go up there now. So they went up. And God told them, don't go. You'll be defeated by them. I'm not with you. So don't go. But they refused to listen. They still went up on their own. Then surely they were defeated. We have to know when God is with us and when God is not with us. When we grumble against God, God is not with us. And if you continue to move on and say, God is with me, think twice. God is not with you. When God is not with you, you will surely defeat it. You need to know whether God is with you. God is on your side or God is not on your side. That's why the Israelites, that's why the king asked, Lord, are you going to hand this country over to me? If that's the plan, I will go. But if he is not with us, I will not go, because I know I will be defeated. So you have to ask, when you do something, God, are you with me? Or are you not with me? Am I trusting you? Or am I rebelling against you? Or not trusting you? When God is with me, I will always win. When God is not with me, you will lose. But what makes that God is with you versus God is not with you? When you be faithful to Him, when you trust Him, you know God is with you. When you disobey Him, when you grumble against Him, surely God won't be with you. When He's with you, He's going to put you in His back and He's going to walk through this wilderness. But when you're not, you're walking by yourself. So remember, what Moses is trying to teach the second generations what they should be doing, what they have to remember. He's walking through all this incident that occurred in the past life, and then teaching them, remember what happened to this. So learn the lesson from your forefathers so you don't do this anymore. So he's just pretty much looking back, remembering what his forefather had done, what God had done to them, reminding them, remember, this is what happened to your forefathers. So don't do this. Learn the lesson from this incident, what to do and what not to do. Reminding them. This is not a new story. We already learned all the story. And then God is still reminding to us, remember what I had done. Remember. Okay? Alright, instead of going to chapter 2, we'll probably just cover that next week. So up to here, Deuteronomy, second law, or repetitions, and reminding them and re-emphasizing all the work that God had done, all the law that God had given to them. So you are learning as a second generation what you should do. And you learn the lesson from this, the Israelites. Any question?